name's Jordan Larry Hansen, also known as the Dev, and I'm here to review. As I mentioned before, the video kind of did a little short circuit, so I'm actually reviewing 3 days of spoilers, because the previous video that covered kind of like the day 2 and day 1 of spoilers kind of got lost in recording. I explained in a previous video, so today we're actually going to cover all 3 days of the spoilers that I missed. It's going to be a long video, so you might want to go get a drink and such, and, well, let's just talk about some cards that are actually pretty cool. One of kind of my janky favorite cards of the set, a Captive Audience. Probably something I'm just trying to do with this video with talking about the set, so pun there. Anyway, 5 red and a black for an enchantment. It's a Rakdos card. And this enchantment enters the battlefield under the control of an opponent of your choice. So why are you spending 7 mana to give your opponent an enchantment? Well, it's because at the beginning of your upkeep, translation, the opponent's upkeep that you give this enchantment to, they have to choose one that hasn't been chosen. Your life total becomes 4. Discard your hand, or each opponent creates 5 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. What? Okay, let's just get this out of the way pretty dang quick. This is exclusively a commander card. This is kind of like a highlight card to put in like either a Rakdos style aggro, or not even a Rakdos kind of shenanigans deck. Whether if it's the new Rakdos that we just got from the set, or maybe your own personal preference of Rakdos, Mardu, whatever that has the black-red into it. Because this is mostly there for shenanigans in Commander. Like, you give it to the one opponent that's in the lead, and they have to choose between, okay, let's be frank, all the choices are not good choices. Getting your life total at 4, if you started like at 40 or had a major life gain, that is very bad. Discarding your hand, you lose your resource. That's pretty bad. And depending on if this is a mass multiplayer game, getting multiple opponents 5 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, which could also benefit like token strategies for decks you're going against, or a variety, maybe even zombie decks, which are popular decks in Commander. All these choices are not good for the opponent who has to deal with them, and that's kind of the point. The point is this is kind of like a major enchantment that's supposed to just essentially, if an opponent's in a lead, you play this enchantment on them to try to reduce the flow, and honestly kind of troll the opponent, if we're being frank. Now, this enchantment is kind of too high-costed for Standard, though I will be frank, it is janky enough that it is kind of one of those where I kind of am tempted to make a jank ramp deck just to give my opponent of a copy of this, because it is kind of funny, just to see how the opponent interacts with this type of enchantment. But honestly, this is more for Commander play, and if you have a deck that can play this and then maybe also flicker this enchantment to give a new instant to another opponent, you're off to the races for some silly shenanigans, though on the other side of the coin, your play group might be a little salty after this. I'm not gonna lie. But still, this is a fun card. The art pretty much says what it is. It will captivate the audience, and it's gonna make one player at the table probably pretty salty at you, if we're being quite frankly honest. Next up, Tome with the Guild Pack, a 5-mana artifact that has whenever you cast a multicolored spell, draw a card, and it also works as a mana rock to add 1 mana of any color. Reading it has given me a glimpse of what makes this deeply flawed city so very magnificent. Now, this is actually a really cool card. Now, on one hand, it's kind of like a downgraded Gilded Lotus, since you're only getting 1 mana out of this mana rock. However, you're doing that in the exchange that anytime you're going to cast a multicolored spell, you're going to draw a card, which is very powerful. Having a mana rock that has an extra benefit to it is nothing to sneeze at. I could see some Commander decks wanting to play this card no sweat, especially if they have a lot of multicolored spells within their deck design. But also, this could just have a potential to see play in Standard in a 5-color shenanigans deck, or maybe a multicolored deck that a majority of the spells are multicolored, whether it's golden cards like gold creatures or split spells, etc, etc, etc. This card is a lot more powerful than you think at first glance. It's kind of like I always get the name of the Ixalan card, but it's the one that has the flag, and it's like a tribal. You choose a tribe, and then once you have a creature that is that tribe enters the battlefield, you draw a card. It's kind of like that, but this one's more consistent since you don't have to be very restricted to a tribe archetype, but more in a sense that you are actually going into multicolored deck design, which, to be fair, we're going to get all the shock lands, we're going to have a lot of check lands, so that's a lot more playable than at first glance. Honestly, this card will probably see play. It's a good card. Next up, a card that pretty much makes every Azuri Commander player I know just go up and down in excitement. Incubation Druid. 1 in the green for a creature elf druid. Add 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce. If Incubation Druid has +1/+1 counters on it, add free mana of that type instead. And it has a depth free, so if you spend 5 mana, you can put free counters on this, making this a free 5, which makes this a lot more trickier to remove. Overall, this is a really absurd mana dork we got from this set. It's an elf, which is pretty relevant in elf-style decks, which is pretty cool. And what's actually really neat about this, you can actually use this elf in kind of a multicolored deck, because we do have lands in the meta that can produce multiple mana of multiple colors. So the fact that you can use this to essentially be a 2-drop mana dork that can tap for mana of any color, as long as you have a land that can produce multiple colors, that can allow a level of mana fixing that is nothing to sleep on. Now, yes, this is going to be prone to a lot of early game removal, and I don't think many people are going to... And to get the second part of the text, which is a really big mana dork, which is powerful, you do have to get a counter on this, but I do think you can actually do this in a lot more easier ways than, say, using the Adept trigger. You can maybe put this in a Simic deck and then use stuff like the Essence Capture we've seen, and then counter a target creature spell, put a counter on this, oh, now it can tap for free mana, so if you do that on turn free, counter a creature spell that's problematic, like the most probable one it's going to probably counter, say, like a Chupacabra. You do that, and then, like, by turn 4 or turn 5, you can ramp up the free mana and then make, like, a 6 or an 8-drop. That, granted, is best case mentality, but still, just those little synergies and also cards that we have in the meta that can add counters to creatures, this can become a pretty big mana dork pretty quick. I think this will see standard play. It's a very powerful mana dork. Don't sleep on it. And it's obviously going to see commander play in the counter matter style decks that are in the meta. Azuri, the obvious one, but there are many other ones that put counters in their creatures as well, so, like a Tratzer I could think of also, so keep that in mind. Overall, great card. Next up, another really cool 2-drop that we got, Priest of the Forgotten Gods. It is 1 in a black for a creature human cleric that's a 1/2, and it has sacrifice 2 other creatures, any number of target players, so you can target multiple players in Commander, keep that in mind. Each lose 2 life and sacrifice a creature. Also, keep in mind, I don't know if you ever want to do this, but you can actually target yourself with that ability as well. So keep that in mind. I don't know if you needed to have an additional sack outlet, but keep that in mind. But when you do this, you also can add 2 black and draw a card. The Orzhov are not the only religious tradition on Ravnica, nor the oldest. Honestly, this is just a really cool 2-drop. Now, the problem is, this is a tempting card to put in the Aristocrats deck, and it does have a lot of power within its activated ability, but it is really dictated on a few set of circumstances. One, you have to have the creatures, and they have to be other creatures. You can't sacrifice herself. Keep that in mind. And also, this is kind of one of those weird cards where you're kind of building up to it, and if opponents see this, they are going to remove this because they know this is kind of an engine scenario. Especially the fact that you can draw a card and get 2 black mana from the sacrifice. However, I could see this scene play in kind of like a black-green sapling token deck. You could sacrifice your saplings to make the opponent forced to sack something, and then you get the mana and draw a card. That's actually very powerful. Also could be just put in Slimefoot decks in general, coming to think of it. Just that ability alone, it's a very powerful creature that allows to both remove, hopefully, big stuff like Carnage Tyrant, because the opponent's forced to sack. It doesn't target the opponent. It doesn't target the opponent's creature, it targets the opponent. Though, granted, if they have hexproof through any manners that we do have in the meta, so keep that in mind. You can't target the player if he has hexproof, so yeah, kind of a no-brainer there, but there's stuff like... Oh, let me think. There's stuff like you not probably wanting to activate this ability on the opponent's turn if they have, say, that's a gruel free cost creature that gives the player hexproof instead. You know, stuff like that. Still, I think this is a powerful card, but I do think this card will have trouble seeing play at first because it has to be in a very specific deck, and it also has to find a way to protect itself because once people realize this is your main engine, they are going to try to kill this like that. So keep that in mind. Overall, though, really powerful card. Don't underestimate it. Next up, the Lumbering Battlement. 4 and a white for a creature beast that has vigilance. It's a 4/5. And when it enters the battlefield, exile any number of other non-token, so keep that in mind. The creatures that you exile with it have to be non-token creatures you control until it leaves the battlefield. Lumbering Battlements get +2/+2 for each card exiled with it. Okay, this is an interesting card. Now, at first glance, it seems like the best way to take advantage of this card is have cards that have benefits of, say, into the battlefield effects, so you can get multiple into the battlefield triggers. Like, you get the first one off when you cast a creature, and then the creature's on the battlefield and such, and then you play a Lumbering Battlement, hide the creatures under the Lumbering Battlement, and then when it gets removed, or you flicker it or something, then your creature enters the battlefield and get an additional into the battlefield effect. Stuff like that. It kind of reminds me, in a sense, well, it kind of reminds me of Felidar Guardian, but not as broken. Because Felidar Guardian bounce non-land permanents, this just only bounces creatures you have. And the fact that it gets a stat boost for each card it exiles because of that ability is nothing to sneeze at. Let's say you had like 3 creatures on the battlefield. This could be a 5 mana 6/11. Oh no, not even 5 mana 6/11. If you bounce 3 creatures, that's a 5 mana 10/11. That's pretty scary for the opponent. So the opponent will try to remove it. And the best part is, it's not when a creature dies, the creature's return back, it's when it leaves the battlefield. So if it gets exiled, if it gets bounced through a variety of measures, you're still going to get the creatures that you exiled with this back. So keep that in mind. With that factor alone, I think this is a card that might be considered in kind of like mid-range decks for the purpose of, say, you know, you're playing against a control deck, you know next turn they're going to be trying to play like a board wipe, like say Settle the Wreckage, or even the new board wipes we're seeing in the set and such. Then you can actually play this as a preemptive protective measure to just protect your creatures from a board wipe. Then the opponent's scared because you got a big creature, so they have to use their spot removal or use the board wipe and still protect your board. And just by that little versatility alone, even with the high cost, I do think this has a chance to see standard play for the factor that it is a very protective-oriented base creature when you look at it. It's actually kind of really cool design when you see it. So overall, we'll see standard play. Most likely we'll see play in Commander and the Flicker decks and such, so keep that in eye. Any other Eternal formats? Probably not. I think this is too high cost for other formats, but I've been wrong before. Next up, Hero Precinct 1. A very interesting card. It's a 2 mana 2/2, so it's a bear. Creature Human Warrior. And whenever you cast a multicolored spell, create a 1/1 white human creature token. When the established order falters, what remains are ordinary people and their struggle to survive. So, this kind of reminds me of Young Pyromancer in Red, where essentially, like with Young Pyromancer, anytime you cast a spell, you create an elemental token. Well, this is different because whenever you cast a multicolored spell, so, and remember, it said spell, so it can also be an instant sorcery, it can be a creature, it can be enchantment, it can be anything, you create a 1/1 white human creature token. Which is actually really, really cool. The fact that we have a very incentive to go into multicolored thanks to this 2-drop because we get a token out of it, this might be secretly a good card for, say, a Selesnya or even maybe a Boros token-based deck. Because there's little synergies you can think of. Like, the one I could think of right off the bat is, let's say you cast this, then, like, turn 3, you cast, like, say, I don't know, maybe an Imra? I always get her name wrong. Then you get the token, you cast another multicolored spell that helps benefit your token strategy, you get another token. Or even in Boros, you could cast stuff like Heroic Reinforcements, and then get the 1/1 token and get the 2/2 soldier tokens, and then they get haste, and then you can attack with a bunch of 2/2s. There's just little synergies like that I think this card will be a very decent card in any weenie decks that decide to go into multicolored strategies, or maybe even potentially mid-range shenanigans, like maybe the blue-white creature-oriented deck that they've been trying to advertise with us with stuff like Dovin Bond and such. A very good bear. It's a bear with upside. You will probably play this in limited, no sweat. I think it has a chance for standard play, and it might even have some chance in other internal formats. I'm not 100% sure yet, but the power level is there, and if a deck is brewed around it, it's a human, so who knows? Maybe we'll see play in a human deck. Who knows? Next up, this one's in an alternate language, but I did read this. Essentially, it is Orzhov Imposter or Orzhov Impersonator, and essentially it's a 1/2 human that has Death Touch, and it has Afterlife 1. Honestly, this is just a pretty... It's actually a pretty decent card. The factor in Limited is really good, because it's a 1/2 with Death Touch, so the opponent has to decide whether or not they want to trade into this or not. And the worst part is, not only do they have to worry about trading in with it, the factor that you get the 1/1 creature, spirit creature token out of it, it then just provides extra incentive for your opponent not to attack. Because it's like, oh, if I attack, then I'm going to give them a creature. Oh, and also I'm going to give my creature die due to Death Touch. And just stuff like that makes this a very imposing threat in Limited. As for Standard, I don't think so, because it's a 1/2 and it can die to a lot of removal in the format. Though I could see some people might not minding that because the factor alone that you do get the token out of it, presuming it doesn't get lava coiled. But on the other hand, if you try to fish a lava coil out of someone, that might actually be good, because then lava coil is not used on maybe your late game creatures or such, or maybe your mid-range deck or such. This is one of those I have to wait and see. But it is an interesting card. It is an interesting Afterlife card, because having a Doom Traveler with Death Touch and an extra point of toughness, and the factor that the opponent has to decide whether or not they both want their creature to die and give you a flying token, that's going to introduce some interesting gameplay shenanigans where the opponent has to do some thinking. Next up, Scorchmark, or Scorch, I think is what the card's called. 1 and a red for a sorcery spell. Keep in mind, it's a... Oh, no, wait, it is an instant. Yes, it's an instant. 1 in red for an instant spell that says, deal 2 damage to a target creature. If the creature would die this turn, exile it instead. Now, on one hand, this is kind of a worse Magma Spray, and Magma Spray was a very popular card. People who played during the Amonkhet block, you remember seeing that card a lot. And this is, by I think intentional design, a very worse version of Magma Spray. However, I do think it's not a bad idea to have that. I don't think it's a good idea to have a Magma Spray-like card in the format, say, in the same format where we have that spirit that gives your instant sorcery spells Death Touch. That would be obnoxious. So the fact that we're just have to pay an extra mana for a Magma Spray-like ability, I think is actually a lot more balanced than people will take at first glance. Now, will this be a competitively viable card? I don't think so. I mean, I could see some Rakdos decks still just putting it like in a sideboard scenario, just in case they go against kind of like an Afterlife deck. Because this does kill Afterlife creatures, and then when it exiles, it doesn't get the token. So, if Afterlife becomes a popular enough archetype, this might just see play in some sideboards just to protect them against the Afterlife creatures and such. So that's something to consider at the very least. Though it's a perfectly fine limited card. It's just removal, and it removes some annoying creatures, especially those, as I mentioned before, with Afterlife. Next up, Dovin's Acute... Okay, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, so forgive me. Acuity, I think it is. 1 white and a blue for an enchantment. I think the nickname that everybody's giving this is Information Campaign, which you'll see why in a minute. When this enchantment enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life and draw a card. And then, whenever you cast an instant spell during your main phase, you may return this card to its owner's hand. Dovin ticked the planeswalkers off on his fingers. Himself, Domri, Kaya, Ral, Vraska, and Bolas made an even 6. So yeah, as we've seen with, pretty much with story-wise, it seems like Nicol Bolas is coming to town. Probably in the next set and such, so we know he's coming, so we'll see that when it comes. But overall, let's talk about this card itself. Honestly, this is a pretty good card, especially a card for limited, I would say. The factor that this just essentially cycles itself and you gain 2 life out of it, that's just fine. And the factor that they're encouraging the addendum-based mechanic, so anytime you do cast an instant spell, maybe you cast a removal spell, maybe you cast a draw spell, maybe you cast that one addendum that makes it where your creatures get like, well, actually, I didn't think we talked about that yet. We'll talk to it. There are some powerful addendum spells, but essentially when you cast those during your main phase, or maybe just a instant spell you don't mind casting during your main phase, you can bounce this and then draw more cards. This might be a potentially very powerful card in standard and control based decks. It's something that I think will be considered at the very least. It's a good card. It's definitely funny to see how we have this duality, kind of like with Disinformation Campaign being making the opponent have to discard a card and you draw a card, and now this one is just life gain and you draw a card. It kind of has a mirrored kind of look to it, which is kind of cool. Don't know if it was intentional, but it's kind of cool to see that. Next up, well, we just seem like to be getting all the good guild mages right now, and we got a good one, Clan Guild Mage. This is the Gruul Guild Mage. It's, or Gruul, I don't know if you have to emphasize the ool in the Gruul, so who knows, someone will remind me in the comments. Red and a green for a creature human shaman that has 1 and a red, activate, target creature can't block this turn, or 2 and a green and tap. Target land you control becomes a 4/4 elemental creature with haste until end of turn. It's still land. Yeah, this is a really silly guild mage. I mean, it's a decent 2/2 in a creature-oriented deck, which, let's be frank, if you're playing Gruul, you're probably playing a creature-oriented deck. And the fact that you can activate this to make a target creature probably their biggest blocker, not able to block so you can attack in with your other aggressive creatures, that's very powerful. And just the factor alone, let's say you don't have as many creatures, but you still have the guild mage. The factor that maybe you had too many lands since you're playing like in limited and such. The fact that you can take your land, and even there's some lands that, let's say we get a land that has indestructible, so keep your eye out for indestructible lands. I don't think we have any in the meta, but keep that in mind. The fact that you can take any land, make it into a 4/4 elemental creature, and then with haste, and then swing in, that could actually help with some peculiar board states, or just help you to get in some extra points of damage. This is going to be a perfectly fine limited card. This is a... I'm almost tempted to say this is a pick one. It depends on, I think there are better cards that you probably want to pack one, pick one, but this is very close to being a pack one, pick one. This kind of ties with the Azorius Guild Mage as kind of one of the best guild mages. It's just those abilities are very relevant to what you want to do in Gruul. It's a good card. Don't underestimate it. Next up, one of the most silly common spells we got, and it is... the Mana Leak actually revealed this, as well as pretty much within the previous card. Actually, before I go into this, I'm going to make one quick side note. I would recommend you, with the Scryfall and such, it's hard to mention all the sources of people who spoiled this card. I would say if you have the time and such, go check who revealed these cards and check out their like reveal video and such. Some of these are small time creators and they would like the support and such just to get the views or just show them off and just show the creativity that they did when going into making these card reveal videos. Like, the Mana Leak one in particular was actually pretty funny, and I even had a good chuckle out of it. So, I'm sorry in advance if I don't mention all the names. It's just kind of tricky because I'm trying to get this done, especially since it's a large quantity. But, just a little side note here. Please support these people by just looking at their videos and such, of them revealing the cards and such. They appreciate the support, they will appreciate the views, and if you like their content, then you can like, subscribe, etc, etc, etc. I say you should try that out, because it is something that some of these people put really hard work into these reveal stuff, so keep that in mind. Next up, now let's just get to the broken common, shall we? Skew of the Critics, 2 and a red for a Skew of the Critic deals 3 damage to any target sorcery, but it has the little nifty thing that it can cost 1 mana, Dane's a Spectacle. Going to a Rakdos show is dangerous. Trying to leave early can be fatal. Oh boy, this card is silly. We pretty much got a Lightning Bolt. Yes, it's a Lightning Bolt that you can only cast on your turn, and if you dealt damage, but let's be frank, the decks you're going to be playing this card are burn-based, damage-based oriented decks. So casting this for 1 mana is going to be a lot more easier in those decks than you would take on first glance. And as many people who already reviewed this card are mentioning, This, along with all the other lightning type of bolts, damage-based burn spells, will have a total like of 8 kind of like lightning bolt, deal free damage to something target effects in standard. That's a scary thought when you think about it. I think burn is going to be a very more popular archetype now, especially with the fact that we have skewered the critics in standard. So if you are the type of player that likes to burn, deal damage to the opponent's face and not interact with the creatures, keep an eye out on this meta. I think this meta is going to be just for you, just because of this card. Just because of the mana accumulation of all the burn spells that we have, because, yeah. Also, this is a card that will probably see Eternal Format play. This is a card that will probably see play in Bonded Burn, because the factor is they can activate the Spectacle cost for this relatively easy. Also, other formats it might see play in. There is the potential it might see play in Pauper. I have a friend who plays Pauper a lot, and he said, is it redundant? Probably not, since Burn is still consistent enough that they don't need the extra Burn spell. But the fact that this could be potentially playable in Pauper is nothing to sneeze at. Overall, great card, though I do think it's going to be a card that's going to be very annoying once, like, in the few months once we get burned a lot, so... Let's just say Angel of Grace makes a lot more sense after seeing this card. I'll just put it like that. We'll get to that once we see that Angel, but yeah, you'll see it when we see it. Next up, this one is kind of like an alternate Wrangler spoiler, but essentially it's like Cinderlash or something along that, and it basically has this ability. Whenever an opponent actually, let me read the translation real quick because I want to make sure I say this right. Yeah, it's whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, Whiplash deals 1 damage to that player. And then you can spend 1 mana to sacrifice to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Whiplash deals 2 damage to that permanent's controller. Okay, I just want to make sure I did the translation right there. Anyway, so this is actually another good Gruul enchantment to help against control-oriented decks. Because, let's be frank, a lot of control decks are going to be casting a lot of removal, they're going to be casting a lot of control magic, they're going to be casting a lot of board wipes, and the fact that having this enchantment out can work as an insurance policy, so every time when the opponent does that, it's going to deal a point of damage to them, that is actually very powerful. It's more like a very powerful commander card, but I do see this as also a very powerful option for standard and even modern, because with decks like very artifact-centric decks like Clark Clan Ironworks, just having this out in your sideboard against that deck archetype and having it played in, it really messes up Clark Clan Ironworks a ton. And just the fact that then, once you see a very problematic enchantment, you can spend 1 mana to sacrifice it and destroy that enchantment right off the spot. Let's say it's like a Search for Cantor or an Immortal Sun, etc., etc., etc. The fact that you can destroy that enchantment right off the bat makes this kind of like an investment burn spell / artifact removal spell, which is really, really cool. I think this will see multiple format play. It will definitely see play in standard. It's a good card, and I think it might even see some play in Commander as well. Next up, a card that I think is mostly a limited card, though who knows, this might actually be a good card to actually make the gate deck a thing. It is Gates Ablaze. 2 and a red for a sorcery spell. Gate Ablaze deal X damage to each creature, where X is the number of gates you control. When the Izzet Spirit of Invention extends to the city's infrastructure, the results are sometimes explosive. So, this is obviously a limited card for people who are into the gates decks, like they get multiple gates and such, and they get this card. It's actually a pretty decent board wipe card. Let's say you have like 2 to 3 gates out, and then you can use this as a free mana, deal free damage to each creature. That's pretty good, and the more gates you put into your deck, the more powerful it becomes. Now, you have to be careful when playing board wipes like this, because you kind of have to do it in kind of like a sandbag route, which is actually kind of a cool design they did here. Because in most gate decks, you are going to be slow tempo, since you are playing what essentially amounts to tapped lands. So you can just play it slow, your opponent will build up their board, and then once you have like 3 or 4 gates, you can cast Gates Ablaze, and then you pretty much reset the board state, so then hopefully you can better your board state with your mana fixing and such, instead of gates and such, and then play your stuff. That's actually pretty cool, at least for limited. For standard, well, if there was a card to make the gate deck work, this is probably the card, because the factor is with gate decks, they're slow tempo, And when there's such slow tempo, the factor is they are prone to very aggressive decks or aggro-based decks. So the factor that if I'm paying such slow tempo to actually get a very decent board wipe against those aggressive decks, that actually is very helpful in a standard meta. So if a gate deck or a multicolor 5-color deck is going to be a Fiend, it's probably going to be on the back of this card, so to help protect him against more aggressive deck archetypes. Overall, I think it's a fine card. We'll definitely see play in Limited if you're in the gate deck. Keep that in mind. I'll definitely see play in Standard if a gate deck exists. And I know the one guy who's playing the Mazes in Commander deck. You know the guy. Who probably are looking at this card and be like, cool, net a board wipe. Okay, next up. This one's an alternate language as well, but lucky enough, this one's an easy one to translate. Basically, it's a 2-cost artifact that says multicolored creatures you control get +1/+1. So it's a 2-mana lord for multicolored creature spells. That's a very, very powerful card. Don't underestimate this card. This card is kind of absurd when you think about it. Now, the one thing that's making me think why this card is absurd is honestly is because of Afterlife alone. As people who have been looking closely at Afterlife and the Spirit tokens, some of them are thinking Doom Traveler since it creates a Spirit token. Keep in mind, those Spirit tokens are black and white, aka they are multicolored, aka they get a stat boost thanks to this card. So the fact that now, like, really good Afterlife creatures like the Angel, Seraph, and such, can, when they die, create now just say 2/2 Spirit tokens, and the fact that Angel itself would then get a stat boost as well because it's a multicolored creature. I think it's Angel of the Seraph. I could be wrong. I'm having a brain fart at the moment. But essentially the Orzhov Mythic Angel that got revealed. So just the fact of that alone just makes this a very silly card. Now, what deck will use this card will be interesting to see. Though, keep in mind, we are in a meta with a lot of multicolored creatures, so I do have a feeling that this will see standard play just for the factor that you can put this in decks like, say, Boros Aggro, like maybe even Boros Angels could play this card. Now, granted, whether or not they want to play a slow 2-drop is another story, but keep an eye out on this card. Cheap lords like this are nothing to underestimate, so keep an eye out on it. Next up, this one I got the translation. It's Victory at the Plaza. And what it basically amounts to is when it enters the battlefield, doesn't enter the battlefield tapped, it enters untapped. When it enters the battlefield, if you can control a gate, or I think it's, let me make sure I got this right so I don't. If you control 2 or more gates, I didn't know if it was 1 or 2. If you control 2 or more gates, you gain free life. And it has tap for just a regular generic mana, or you can tap it for any mana that a gate you control can produce. So this is actually really cool because it could actually be the one land that actually can make the 5-color multicolor deck work. And here's how it's going to make it work. There's a gate that we got previously in the Guilds of Ravnica, which was a gate that kind of works like pretty much the tap gate where it enters the battlefield tap, and you spend 1 mana, unless if you don't, then you sacrifice it, but it had the ability that it can tap for a mana of any color. So, let's say we play those gates, and then we play it along with the Plaza. If we play it along with the Plaza, then we essentially kind of have, I'm forgetting the name of the 2 cards, it's like Reflecting Pool in the second card, and I'm having a brain fart, you could probably mention it in the comments. But then we have a land that, thanks to that specific gate that we put in our deck, can tap for any color, which makes mana fixing really, really easy. Now, granted, you have to be very cautious. Like, you know, you have to make sure you probably want to put regular mana in there, or maybe even gate lands and such. But just by that little combo alone, makes this a very powerful land. Now, the problem is this might be prone to land hate, which we do have some in this set. And we also have some popular cards like Field of Ruin that does see play in Standard, so your combo might be hated out, so keep that in mind. So make sure you put some basic lands in there. But just by that factor alone, I do think a 5-color deck, 5-color good stuff, can actually work, just because of the basis of this combo with the gate from the previous set alone. Keep an eye out for this. This card will see a lot more play than you think. But also getting the life gain is actually pretty nice too. If you can control gates at the very least. So I think it's more going to be a limited base mechanic. As for the formats you'll see play, I think you'll see play in standard. You'll see play in limited if you have a lot of gates. Probably EDH as well if you're playing a gate deck. I don't know about any other Eternal formats, but it'll be interesting to see. Okay, next up. The Font of Agonies. An enchantment for 1 black that's whenever you pay a life, put that many blood counters on Font of Agonies, and then 1 in a black, remove 4 blood counters from Font of Agonies, destroy target creature. No worthwhile reward is easily gained. From the quote from Nicol Bolas. So yeah, we are foreshadowing that Nicol Bolas is coming, as I mentioned before. And the art here is really creepy and actually kind of awesome. Jason, good job. Now, anyway, as for the card itself, it's a card that if you brew your deck right, can actually be a potentially very powerful card. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we do have a lot of cards in Magic that make you pay life for something. For example, ones I could think of right off the bat, it's like Doom Whisperer or like Ardrill's Bloodfast. That's the ones that I think people are going to think of right off the bat. Though the one thing that I think people won't think of right off the bat, and it took me a minute before I realized this, it's, hey, wait a minute. You can actually get blood counters using shock lands. And shock lands are going to be a thing that's popular in the meta because, you know, mana fixing, all that stuff. So the fact that I can use this enchantment and then use my later gameplay shock lands as just ways to add up counters to use as a removal spell, that is actually a potentially very powerful ability on a 1-cost enchantment. Now, on the other side of the coin, you're kind of foreshadowing it when you build up your enchantments and such and building up to this enchantment. So it is prone to enchantment removal. And I do feel like this is kind of one of those cards that's a deck's going to be dictated around it, or it's going to be a card that will fit into a deck, but if it doesn't, it won't. Still, I think this ability is a very powerful ability. Don't underestimate static enchantments that can be used as removal spells that can be very powerful. It will probably be tested with in Standard. I don't know about any other formats. It is tempting to try this in Modern since we have the concept of Phyrexian mana and the fetch and the shock lands and creature and decks that do have a lot of life loss in their deck designs, such as like Death Shadow and such. It'll be interesting to see. I'll say that right off the bat. But it's also a pretty good commander card, actually. Next up, Scrabbling Claws. A 1-mana artifact, and I believe it's a reprint, but don't quote me on that. That essentially has target player exiles a card from their graveyard. So you target a player, and they have to exile a card from their graveyard. Or you can spend 1 mana and sacrifice the artifact to exile a target card from a graveyard, and then you draw a card. Honestly, this is just a very perfect limited graveyard hate card. You will use this if you know you're going against like graveyard matter type synergies, and you can make the opponent, hopefully, though the con is the opponent does choose, hopefully force the opponent to exile a very problematic card. I don't know if it will see too much play in limited. Like, I think it's more sideboard until you realize you're going against a deck that has graveyard matter synergies, which we're not going to get that much of graveyard matter cards, at least from what I've seen so far in this set, so I think this is more going to be practical for Standard. And honestly, this is kind of a perfect Standard meta card. Because what this does is, if the opponent is focusing on graveyard matter synergies like, say, Golgari Reanimator, or is it Drakes and such, they rely on jumpstart spells a lot. If you can actually force your opponent to exile cards that they might not want to exile, like, say, jumpstart spells, or like in Golgari Reanimator stuff that they want to reanimate, that's a very powerful ability to at least make this see potentially some very effective sideboard play in paper. As for like MTG Arena, who knows, maybe. As for, let's say, any other Eternal formats, well, it kind of says, if it sees play in those formats, it sees plays in those formats, it's a reprint. There are probably better options like Relic of Progenitus in Eternal formats for Graveyard Hate shenanigans, so keep that in mind, though I do think this is a perfect Standard card and a perfect sideboard card for both the Limited and the Standard format. And when you know you're going against a Graveyard deck, or you see a meta where the Graveyard deck is very popular, you just slot this light in and you'll be fine. Next up, another jank enchantment that I kind of want to brew around, Mirror March. 5 and a red for an enchantment that says whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, flip a coin until you lose a flip. For each flip you won, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Those tokens gain haste. Exile them at the beginning of the next instep. This is so much of a commander card, it's not even funny. Now, this is a card that honestly it's mostly very good in, say, Perforos, or you could put this in the coin flip commander decks and such. This is a card that's actually perfect for those type of decks because, like the coin flip deck, they're going to rely on coin flip synergy matters, and this is a perfect card for that deck, and if you can get multiple creatures out of it that have haste and such, that's perfect. Now, as for standard, really you just want to take advantage of this with cards that have really good into the battlefield effects, such as, say, Regisaur Alpha, or maybe even if you want to remove a big board, maybe you can Mirror March and hope that when you play, say, like the Chupacabra, you get multiple Chupacabras. It's kind of like a card where you can, if you can actually get away with this and your coin flips are good, you can actually do some very silly shenanigans with some very funny into the battlefield cards that are in the Magic, currently in Standard Magic. There's some silly shenanigans. I'll say that right off the bat. Like, even for example, that 1/5-cost vampire that when it enters the battlefield, it deals free damage to the opponent and you gain free life. If you can get multiple copies of that off, then hey, you probably won the game. Now, the reason why this enchantment is not really great for standard is the factor it's the variance. You are dictated by the coin flip, and there are just sometimes where you're going to lose your coin flips consistently, and it's going to feel kind of bad. So it's a card that relies on variance, which probably doesn't make this the best competitively viable card. However, I do see myself putting this in a very janky brute deck with stuff like Electro Dominance and all that stuff, and just do some silly shenanigans. Heck, I could probably put this in 1000-Year Goblin, and then once I play a Goblin, get multiple copies of Goblins that maybe have good into the battlefield effects, like the one that creates a treasure, and then maybe do something silly like have this Prospector out and then sacrifice that for a bunch of mana. Like, there's some silly shenanigans you can do with this card. And I think for that, people will try it out just for laughs, but I don't think this is a competitively viable card. I would be surprised if it sees competitive play. But if you want to have some laughs and want to have a game that's literally dictated by a coin flip, here you go. Next up, we have another one of the silly Simic, oh my, this combination is amazing cards. The Sharkdo Crab. 2 green and a blue for a creature, fish, octopus, crab. Yes, you heard that right. For a 4/4 that has Adept 1 for 4 mana, and whenever one or more 1/1/1 counters are put on Sharkdo Crab, tap target creature and opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its control, and that's untap step. Oh, that art is... I'm sorry, that art still makes me chuckle. It's an amazing card in the sense of the art alone. As for the card itself, it's actually a pretty fine limited card. It's a 4-mana 4/4, which you'll play in limited, and the fact that it has this counter-based synergy that whenever a counter gets put on it, you can freeze an opponent creature. In a mid-range Simic deck, that can actually be very powerful and limited. And we have ways to move counters, as we will see throughout the set and such, so I can see a potential in those type of deck archetypes and such. I don't know if this is going to bridge up into Constructed. I think it's too slow for Constructed, even with the freeze effect. Even though we have stuff like Vanity Circle that benefits with tapping down creatures and such. So, I mean, I don't know. I could see Timmy also just playing this card in Standard just because the factor... I mean, come on. It's a Sharkdo Crab. It's a fish octopus crab. You know that the first time you're going to play Fighting Magic when the set is legal, there's going to be the one Timmy player who just opened the cards, saw this card, thinks it's amazing, and they're going to play it just because it's a Sharkdo Crab. Let's be frank. And you cannot blame them because it's a Sharkdo Crab. Overall, great Simic card for limited, but also it's just a fun Timmy card in general. Next up, the Azoria Skyguard. 4 white and a blue for a creature human knight. It has flying, it has first strike, it's a 3/3, and creatures your opponent controls get -1, -0. These new Thopters are all well and good, but 4 eyes are better than none. Honestly, I think I'll be quick with this one. This is just a perfectly fine limited card. I don't really see this see play in Standard or any other Eternal formats. It's just a really good flyer that you can use for Evasive that has a very nice aura-like effect to help make your opponent's creatures deal less damage. But you're probably still playing this because it's a free flying first strike. It's a really decent creature. It will see limited play. Next up, Arrester's Admonition. 2 and a blue. That's an instant to return target creature to its owner's hand. However, if you cast a spell during your main phase, draw a card. Law is the voice of reason. Honestly, just a perfectly fine limited card. Bounce spells are always stuff you want to be considerate about in limited. It can help you with good tempo plays. And the tempo this provides is actually cool. If you need to, you can bounce this on the opponent's turn and just essentially bounce like an aggressive creature to help protect yourself. But if you can bounce a creature during your main phase, and sometimes you will have states where you do that, like let's say you want to attack with a creature but they have a blocker, oh hey, you can bounce the blocker. And the best part, if you do it in that way, you can draw a card, which helps you dig into your deck more, which is actually very powerful. And like with that enchantment, like the information acuity or Dovin's acuity and such that allows you to, when you cast instance on your spell, you bounce that enchantment to your hand, which then will do more card draw and gaining life. I can see this deck existing in limited, and I think it's going to be a more powerful deck than people take at first glance. Keep your eye on this for limited. It's going to be a lot more obnoxious than you think. Overall, though, fine limited card. I could also see this potential to see standard play just for the factor that cycling it allows it can cycle itself. I don't know, but it's something to consider at the very least. Next up, we get one of the rare split card cycle cards, which is the Revival and Revenge. Revival, 2 white, 2 black, white or black, hybrid Orzhov, essentially. That's a sorcery spell to return target creature card with a converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Or Revenge, which is 4 in Orzhov, for a sorcery spell that is double your life total. Target opponent loses half their life rounded up. Okay, it's interesting to see how they're kind of doing this cycle of spells within this set. It seems like what they're doing is with the hybrid mana spells, it's a more kind of popular spell you would want to cast for a majority of the time, while the second half is a spell that you're going to cast kind of rarely and such. For example, Revival. Will you cast Revival? Yeah, you will. The fact that it's a 2-mana sorcery that reanimates a creature of free or mana cost, the fact that you can return some very powerful free drops that are in the meta, say, for example, Goblin Chain Whirler in some decks, or Benelish Marshal, Jade Light Ranger. I can go on with the powerful free drops. And the fact that you can actually reanimate them thanks to this card is nothing to sneeze at. Also, it might even see play in maybe a mill reanimator deck, like with stuff like the zombie that nails the top 3 cards when it enters the battlefield and such. You nail your graveyard, you fill it up, so then on turn 2, you can get a free drop on turn 2, which is very powerful. I can see that type of shenanigan type of deck working in Standard, and just by that factor alone, I think we'll see play. Also, very good modern card in general with Revival. Now for Revenge, I see this more as kind of a commander-like card spell that you want to cast, because it's more funny to double your life total and having your opponent's life total in commander, since you can go from, say, 40 to 80 if you're in commander, and then your opponent going from 40 to 20 is not bad. However, I do think this card will be cast in Standard more than you think. Because the way I'm looking at this is just a really big burn spell. And there are going to be some moments where to finish out a game, you're just going to need a really big burn spell. And Revenge kind of works like that in a semi-way, and also can work as a good defensive option if you need to, like, double your life total to help protect yourself against more aggressive matchups and such. So, while Revenge is not going to be cast as often as the Revival side of it, I think Revenge still is a good card that will see some fringe Standard play. But honestly, it's going to be relied on the factor that most people are going to be playing the Revival, and then that once in a blue moon circumstances where they have to cast Revenge to help close out a game. That factor alone makes this a very powerful card that I think, just with those 2 spells alone within one card, will see Standard play. Next up, another card that will absolutely see Standard play, I would be dumbfounded if it didn't. Angel of Grace, free, white and a white for a 5/4 Angel with Flash. It has flying, and when it enters the battlefield, until end of turn, damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. Whoa. And then, also, even if this is in the graveyard, you can just exile Angel of Grace from graveyard to make your life total become 10 mana. Or not, wow. Legitimately brain fart. Become 10 life total. Sorry, your life total becomes 10. This is... I think this one I could just be very quick on it. This will see standard play. It's a 5/4 with flash and flying, and that effect to help protect you against lethal burn damage is the only card that's making me look at, like, pretty much the Skewed the Critics card that we've seen, and being like, okay, maybe we're safe that we have another burn spell in the meta, just the factor that Angel of Grace exists. The factor that if the opponent tries to do a lethal Banefire, you can flash this in and protect yourself, and then hopefully then get in for a good board presence, play a life gain spell or such. This is the one card that is going to help protect us from burn decks and very aggressive decks, and that's awesome. Also, the fact that it's a 5/4 Angel with flash and flying is nothing to sneeze at. This could just, even if you don't use it for the burn, protecting from burn or damage space oriented spells aspect of it, it's still a 5/4 with flash and flying that's an Angel, and we have Angel Lords in the meta. Yeah, I would be dumbfounded if this doesn't see play. It's a really good card. Don't underestimate it. You're going to see this card a lot. Next up, Awaken the Erstwhile. Free black and black for a sorcery spell that each player discards all cards in their hand, then create that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. In preparation for the conflict, all for soul, the Gagari called upon an army that had slept for millennia beneath the city. So, at first, you kind of look at this and be like, oh, this is an interesting zombie enabler. If you're playing, like, zombies in your deck and such, or you play the zombie lords and all that, hey, I can use this to help get cards into my graveyard, and then, by that, also get zombies, which benefit me on the battlefield and such. That's actually pretty cool. Though the one aspect of this that makes this card a lot more powerful than you take at first glance, this is probably one of the first cards we have that is very good hate hand card. The factor that, yeah, giving your opponent zombies is going to be annoying, but if you can hate out their hand, which has maybe, say, Teferis, Doom Whisperers, a lot of late game creatures that you probably don't want to deal with if you're playing a zombie tribal deck. The fact that you can hate a very problematic hand out, or even hate out board wipes and such, that, and then make your opponent's hand to 1 or 0 to their next step, and then they draw 1 card, just for the factor of that massive hand hate, makes this card a lot more powerful than is taken at first glance. And the factor that, sure, they're going to get 2/2 zombies, but there are ways you can remove the zombies. With board wipes, maybe you have effects that make your zombies stronger, like with zombie lords and such. Or maybe there's enchantments that make their creatures reduce toughness. Hey, I wonder if we have one in this set. Or reduce attack. Hey, we'll see that pretty soon. Trust me. Just with that factor alone, makes this card very powerful. Now, really, I think the effectiveness of this card is going to be very dependent on if a standard zombie deck is a thing, or if hand hate is going to be such a popular mechanic that we don't mind opponents getting zombie tokens if it means we don't have to deal with the... If we don't have to deal with the, as I would put it, the hands of control decks with Teferis and the Nexus of Fate and all that stuff. Though, one thing to keep in mind, one funny combo I could think of as a 9-mana combo, so I don't see this being standard combo, but one thing to keep in mind, we have stuff like Coiny Flash Purse. It was like a creature from the Ixalan block that was a flash creature that when it entered the battlefield, all tokens that would be created under your opponent's control come under your control. I could see a 9-mana combo where somebody plays this, and then before the tokens are created, they flash in the Cut Purse, and then now the zombie tokens that the opponents would have would actually go under your control. Oh, also, one teeny little thing. Just one teeny little combo that to keep in mind. Let's say you're playing a black-white token deck, and you have a card, say, like, oh, Divine Visitation, and then you play Awaken the Erstwhile. Sure, they're going to get zombie tokens, but you're going to get Sarah Angels. Just a thought. So yeah, I think this card has a chance to see standard play, but it'll be interesting to see if it does. if it does. I'm not sure about it, though. One card that's also pretty powerful, it's the Benthic Biomancer. 1 blue mana for a creature merfolk wizard mutant that has 1 in the blue to adapt it for 1. It's a 1/1. And whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a Benthic Biomancer, draw a card and discard a card. I am my white life's work. This one's pretty simple. This is a card that the Merfolk deck wanted really, really badly. The factor that it's a 1-drop Merfolk is very powerful, and the factor that the Merfolk decks do rely on counter-based synergies in general. So the factor that once you put counters on this using stuff like Deep Ludoreet or such, or cards that allow to put counters on your creatures, the factor that that can actually get going the Benthic Biomancer, and with that ability alone, you can actually use it to loot, is a very powerful ability in Merfolk. It can also see maybe be a powerful ability in other deck archetypes, like maybe Mono Blue Temple might want to try this and say, play this out, and then they play Essence Capture, they put a counter on this, and then they can loot? That's actually a pretty powerful ability. I think for Standard, this will see a lot of Standard play. As for Eternal formats, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe this could be tested like in Azuri and those type of deck archetypes. It'll be interesting to see if it sees Eternal format play, but honestly, this is a Standard All-Star card. This card, if a card was going to make the Merfolk deck a thing, this card's going to be a key component along with cards like Biomancer's Familiar and such. Next up, Fresh and Threat. Another rare split card. Fresh, which is 2 red or 2 green, or, the Golgari hybrid mana. For an instant spell, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. Or Threat, which is 2 red and green for a sorcery spell to create a 4/4 red and green beast creature token with Trample. So yeah, I think the same thing kind of applies, as I said, to pretty much the other split card we mentioned. I think this is going to be a card where the left side is going to be cast more than the right side. Though the fact that the right side does have the versatility to be used in circumstances where it needs to be used is pretty nice. Thrash is a very powerful instant ability. It's a very powerful ability in the Golgari, or not. Seriously, every time, I mean Gruul. In the Gruul, kind of like red-green mid-range or rampy, big stuff, mono-stompy deck, the fact that they can use this to remove a problematic creature or even a problematic planeswalker is not an ability to sneeze at. I think this card will see play just for the fact that this can interact with a variety of board states against both mirror matches and also against control matchups, which is cool. And the factor that even if you don't need a removal, you can just then cast this for 4 mana just to create a 4/4 red-green beast creature token with Trample. That's just fine. Mostly I think people will be casting this for the Thrash, but I could see circumstances where people cast this for the Threat. So, honestly, really great Gruul card. It will probably see Standard play. Any other Eternal formats? We'll see. Next up, the Fireblade Artist. Red and a black for a creature human shaman with haste. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice a creature. When you do, Fireblade Artist deals 2 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. Let's find out what kind of audience you are. Festive? Fearless? So, is this card good? Yeah, it's a pretty good limited card. The factor that it's a 2 mana 2/2 with haste in aggressive oriented decks is nothing to sneeze at. The factor that the opponent doesn't have a 2-drop and then you can just play this and then tack and swing into the face is really good. And what's really cool about this card is the factor that sometimes 2/2 and haste become less effective in the later game once the opponents get their creature bases out, so this might not do nothing. The factor that you can sacrifice stuff like at the beginning of your upkeep, maybe you sacrifice like maybe an Afterlife Enabler, or maybe just a creature that's not really seeing much use like a Defender or such, or sacrifice a token and such. You can do that to still peen the opponent or even a Planeswalker's face. That's a very powerful limited ability. Don't underestimate the power of peeners. Sometimes peeners can finish games off, especially in complicated board states. Also, this is also another Spectacle Enabler, which is great for limited. I also see that this might have the potential to see Standard play if the Mardu or Rakdos Aristocrat decks becomes a thing, because this is a free sack outlet. Now, it's a restricted time sack outlet, but the fact that it is a sack outlet that's for free, essentially, is nothing to sneeze at. Overall, very great card. It will see limited play. It's a good limited bomb. I don't say it's like a big bomb, but if you don't have much to pick out of the pack and you know you're going into the Rakdos aggro slash spectacle enabler type of deck archetype, you pick up this card, no sweat. But also, I think this has the potential to slide into standard in the more aggressive Rakdos spectacle oriented, pretty much damage based decks. It'll be interesting to see how much this sees play, but it's a very powerful card. Next up, Spirit of the Spyros. 3 and a white for a 2/4 creature spirit that has flying, and other creatures you control with flying get a +1 toughness. She breathes fair winds to tired griffins and lifts songbirds beyond the reach of stalking cats. Honestly, this is just a perfect limited card. It's a 2/4 flyer, which is fine, it's evasive and such, and the fact that if you have flying tokens, like maybe you have Afterlife creature tokens, and get the toughness boost, like, it's not as effective as you take at first glance, but it's kind of like the Chief of Scales, Chief of Edge from the Cons of Tark. Well, not from the Cons, it was from the. No, it is from the Cons. From the Cons of Tarkir. Most people prefer the attack boost lore than over the toughness boost lores. But there are times where, against mirror matches, if you have opponents that have flying tokens and you have flying tokens, getting the toughness boost is nothing to sneeze at. So overall, fine limited card. I'm not sure if this will see standard play, though, or any other Eternal format play. It's just really just a good Eternal. It's just a really good limited format card. Not Eternal, limited. Next up, an enchantment for Orzhov, Ethereal Absolution. 4 white and a black for an enchantment that has creatures you control get +1/+1. Creatures your opponent control get -1/-1. Also, keep in mind, this is not a legendary enchantment, so you can cast multiple copies of this if you can. Oh, and it has an activate ability of 2 white and a black to exile a target card from an opponent's graveyard. If it was a creature card, you create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. Time to let the dead be dead, Kaya said to Teza. So, other than this being a very good lore card, knowing that the spirits of the Orzhov are going to go free, which is kind of nuts when you think about it, it'll be interesting to see the implications of what happens because of this aspect alone. So, just that factor alone is pretty cool. But the enchantment itself, this is going to be a Commander All-Star card. The fact that you can get this incremental effect on your creatures, and then your opponent's creatures get -1, -1. There's going to be token decks that will run this card, no sweat about it. It will see play in Commander. I do think this also, weirdly enough, the more I thought about it, might have a chance to see some standard play. Now, hear me out on this. The factor is that we have a lot of, the more you think about it, we do have a lot of creatures that enter the battlefield with 1 toughness in the current meta. Like, think about all the Explorer creatures that Gagari plays. Think about the aggro 1-drops. Think of, like, a lot of powerful drops that their main benefit come from the fact that you can put counters on them, but they still enter the battlefield as 1/1s. This card, even think about the token decks, like with March of the Multitudes and such. This card actually kind of hates those synergies and those archetypes relatively quick. And now the question you think of, well, this is still a 6-mana enchantment. It's going to be pretty slow, right? Well, the thing is, you're going to be putting this in more like a token-oriented deck, right? And we have cards like Sauna Freyles in the meta, which can actually help us ramp to this card a lot more faster than you think. And by that factor alone, I think this card is going to be suspiciously a very effective standard card in the token-oriented decks that use Sauna Freyles as a ramp option. So keep that in the back of your brain. Overall, it's a fine card. We'll see standard play. We'll definitely see commander play, though. That's a no sweater. And if you need to play this in limited, just play this in limited in the decks that will want to play this type of card, like the Afterlife deck and such. So, or decks that will have a lot of creatures. So keep that in mind. Next up, the Windstorm Drake. 4 and a blue for a creature Drake flying. Other creatures you control with flying get +1/+0. Drakes become especially voracious as they prepare for their autumn migration, hunting the city through fairs from dawn to dusk. So, honestly, kind of like Spirit of the Spires, it's more just a perfect limited card. It's a 5-mana free flyer, which is decent, and the factor that you can give your flying creatures attack boosts, especially like spirits and such that we have in the set, or other flyers that we have in the set, it's a very powerful limited card. I don't think it will see any other Eternal format plays. I mean, we're in a format with Crackling Drake and the Drakes and such, and I don't think this Drake would cut it in that deck, to be personally honest. Still, perfectly fine limited card. Next up, as I was mentioning before, this is the other guild mage that ties with the Gruul guild mage, being the more powerful guild mage. It ties pretty much in power level. The Simic guild mage, white and a blue for a 2/2 human wizard. It has two activate abilities. White, you gain 2 life, or blue, draw a card and discard a card. This card is absurd. The fact that this is a 2 mana 2/2 bear, it's a bear with upside, but the upside you get from this is absurd. The fact that if you're in a board state and you can just at the end of the opponent's turn tap this to gain 2 life, that's very good. And the fact that this is a looter, the fact that you can loot with this and dig within your deck is a ridiculously absurd limited card. It might even actually see some standard play. I think in some control decks or some mid-range token, or not mid-range kind of like Creature Matters Azorius decks that they're trying to encourage, this card might just see play for that aspect alone, the fact that it can loot and such and help you dig for your spells. This card's good. It will see limited play, no sweat about that, and it might just be powerful enough just to cross into standard. The keyword is might. We have to wait and see. Next up, another split card, which is Warrant and Warden. Warrant, a hybrid of the Azorius colors for 2. Instant spell, put target attacking or blocking creature to the top of its owner's library. Or Warden, which is free white and a blue for a sorcery to create a 4/4 white and blue Sphinx creature token with flying and vigilance. So honestly, it's yet the same cycle these spells were. Honestly, I see the left side being cast more often than the right side, though it's nice to have the right side. The left side is a very absurd card that's going to be an absurd card both in limited and in standard. I mean, don't underestimate this. Blue and even blue-white Azorius control decks wanted this card really badly. The fact of the tempo you get from the fact that you put the creature on the top of the Odin's library is nothing to underestimate, and I can even see this to see in mill control that you see in Arena constantly. The fact that you can use this to put the card on the top of the opponent's library at the end of their turn, if they're attacking with it, and then you can mill it with, say, oh, I don't know, like maybe with your Psychic Corrosion and such, and mill the problematic card. That's a combo that I think I'm going to be seeing a lot, and it'll probably be a little bit annoying, but still, it's a very powerful combo for that deck. And even then, while I think it's safe to say that I think a majority of the time people will cast the Warrant side, if you're in the circumstances where you need to just cast the Warden so you can get an evasive creature to deal lethal damage, that's just fine. The fact that you create the token and the token can be used to finish off a game, that's nothing to sneeze at. So, yeah, yet again, a really well-designed rail split card where, honestly, I think the left half's going to be cast more than the right half, but having the right half is still good to have, just in case if you need it. So, overall, good card. Good and limited. It will see standard play. It might even see play in some internal formats just because of the left side alone. Maybe. We'll see. Next up, while not the best guild mage, I think it's kind of one of my personal favorite just because of the art alone. Like the little Jace puppet, it's adorable. Cult Guild Mage. Black and red for a creature human shaman. It's a 2/2. Now has 2 activated abilities. Free and a black, target player discards a card. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. Or red, Cult Guild Mage deals 1 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. Honestly, this is a perfectly fine limited card, and it's going to be a card that in the right Rakdos Spectacle aggro decks, you're going to be annoyed if this is played on turn 2 if you're on the opposing side when this is played. Because the factor is, I think the card is very good for just the second activate ability alone. As we've seen in the set, there's a lot of cards that are trying to do the Spectacle cost and such, and the fact that you can just simply tap this for 1 red mana to deal a damage and get the Spectacle enabled is nothing to sneeze at. I think there's many people who are going to be playing this card just for the fact that they can enable Spectacle alone. But even if you don't have that many Spectacle enablers, the fact that it's a peener can help you actually close out a game in a very, like, board statey long-term game where if you can't just deal more aggressive damage in and you're at a stalemate, the fact that you can just peen your opponent little bit like little could help you close out a game more faster than you think. So overall, fine limited card. Probably not a standard playable card, but who knows, maybe some people play it just because the art alone, and the fact that it is still a decent spectacle enabler, so who knows. Still, I like the art. The art's pretty amazing. Good job, Victor. Adam Minguez, I think is how it's pronounced. Okay, I think we're halfway through this, so let's get going. Next up, Perturbander. 1 blue for a 1/1 creature Salamander Drake. Flying. 7 of blue for depth 4. However, this ability costs 1 less to activate for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. So, this could be, in some circumstances, a 2 mana 5/5 flyer. That could be very silly. However, this just is a fine limited card because it's a 1 mana 1/1 flyer. You don't mind it, and in a later game you can turn it into a 5/5. That's actually pretty cool. Though I know some people have been kind of keeping this eye on this card for standard. I hate the burst of bubble, but I don't think this card will see standard play, especially in the Is It Drake decks. And the main reason why I'm saying that is the same thing as I applied before, kind of like we've seen a lot of decks like with Gagari where people were just going to shock or even just lightning strike, say Jade Light Ranger before it gets counters on and kills the creature. This is kind of like that same effect. Sure, you get the 1/1 flyer, and even if you have enough mana to do the adept ability for 1 blue, the fact is, once you do it, if they have the removal in hand, they're just going to remove it and kill off the creature. So by that factor alone, I don't think this card will see as much standard play. I think people will try it in the Is It decks just to give it a shot. But honestly, I think this is more just a fine limited card that you're going to play without sweat. Next up, Emulation Shaman. 1 in a blue for a creature Viashino Shaman. That's a 1/3 that has, whenever an opponent activates the ability of an artifact, creature, or land that isn't a mana ability, this creature deals 1 damage to that player. And it has a mana sink for 3 and 2 red. For Emulation Shaman, it gets +3/+3 and gains minutes until end of turn. Hello, Kindling. Honestly, this is a perfect limited card. The fact that it's a 2 mana 1/3 is alright. It's not like the great, but the fact is you're mostly doing it for the mana sink ability in limited. The fact that this creature can later become pretty much a 4/6 with menace, that can be a very evasive creature against some peculiar board states and such, and maybe you can get in with some points of damage. Now, the first part of the text could be a relevant one in limited. Like, it's not going to be relevant all the time. But keep in mind, this is going to be more effective standard ability. And I know many people are pointing at, like, Harsh Minter and how Harsh Minter did not see much play. Well, the main reason why Harsh Minter did not see a lot of play was because a lot of artifacts didn't really see that much play thanks to a Braid. But the fact that we're now seeing a lot of more people playing artifacts and also maybe just lands like the Search for Azcanta land and such that have the activated ability, and we have probably creatures that do have activated abilities that opponents will activate, like the one I can think of right off the bat. Gee, I don't know. Maybe Doom Whisperer. The fact that now with this creature out, they have to deal free damage to themselves to Surveil 2, that can be very costly. So, yeah, I know many people are kind of rolling their eyes at this because I think they're making the mistake where they're comparing a meta to a previous meta. I think this card is a lot more powerful to standard than people take at first glance. Keep an eye out on this. I think it's a lot more effective than you think. Next up, we get another rare split card, which in this case is Bedeck and Bedazzle. Bedeck, hybrid of Rakdos mana. Target creature gets +3/-3 until end of turn, or Bedazzle, 4 red and a black for destroy target non-basic land. And then this spell deals 2 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. And yet again, same thing kind of applies as I've been saying with all the other rare spell cycles. Honestly, you're going to be casting the left side a lot more than the right side. And it's perfect. Like, the left side is perfect in a Rakdos aggro deck. The factor that you can either give your, kind of like if you're playing mid-rangey, you can give your creatures that have a big toughness a significant attack boost to get in for lethal damage. That can be very powerful. Like, I could see this card see in play, say, and maybe even Is It Drakes, because it's just too red to get your Is It Drake, let's be honest, a +4/-3 boost, because, hey, this spell's going to go into the graveyard, so then it gets the power boost on that. And the fact that you can just use this as a removal spell to help remove problematic creatures like Adontal Vanguard and stuff like that, this card would just see play because of that factor alone. And yet again, as I'm going to say, like a broken record, there are going to be rare circumstances where you might cast the Bedazzle side. Because as we mentioned before, there are some non-basic lands that are played in this meta. And sometimes you can actually destroy a very problematic non-basic land, like let's say the Search for Azcanta flip. Or maybe a shock land that is giving the opponent one specific color of mana that they need to help play their deck. Hitting out a specific land to help them make their spell casting a lot more awkward is not bad. And there's even going to be that very, 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 very rare circumstances where you are just casting this just to get the 2 damage to a target opponent, just to use as a lethal shock. So yeah, like I said, it's kind of like, it's a good card. Mostly I think people will be casting this for Bedeck, but like I said again, it's still nice to have the Bedazzle side to it just in case if we need it. So yeah, good card overall. Next up, Archlay Angel, 5 and a white for a creature angel, flying, free 4. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life for each gate you control. A ray of hope breaks through the shroud of rain. Honestly, just a perfect limited card. If you're playing the gate decks, you're probably going to play this. There's some flyer decks that are probably going to play this because it's the free 4 flyer, even though it's a little bit costly. It's a fine card. I don't see this breaking into standard, but I could be wrong. Next up, Unbreakable Formation. 2 and a white for an instant spell. Creature control, gain indestructible until end of turn. An addendum. If you cast a spell during your main phase, put a 1/1/1 counter on each of these creatures, and they gain vigilance until end of turn. Honestly, perfectly good standard card. And it's even a perfectly fine limited card. This is going to go into the white weenie type style decks. You'll also see play in pretty much any deck that is trying to be creature base oriented that has white in their color mana. This is just perfect. The fact that they can use this at during your opponent's turn when they're trying to do a board wipe to help protect your creatures. But even then, you can just use this as a finisher to get the 1/1 counters and then just swing in for aggressive damage and then know your creatures are protected since they have indestructible. Yeah, it doesn't protect you against stuff like, say, Settle the Wreckage and such, true, but still, if you know you're not going against a Settle the Wreckage, this just can be used as a finisher. Yeah, this card is a really good card. This will see standard play, no sweat. It's a fine limited card, and it might even see some play in some Eternal formats or even Commander. It's actually just a really, really good card. Like, I don't really say much about it. It's just a good card. But I will say one thing, it is kind of one of the better designed addendum spells. It's kind of cool to have these spells that have an ability that you don't mind casting during the instant, but this additional benefit is actually a cool benefit. So that's enough said. Next up, Trollbred Guardian. 4 and a green for a 5/5 with Adept 2 for free mana, and each creature in control with a +1/+1 counter on it has Trample. Honestly, just a perfect limited card. I don't think you'll see standard play, but it's more you just playing this for a 5 mana 5/5 that if you're playing the Simic Counter Matters deck in limited, you can make your creatures be more evasive with Trample, or even just making this into an inevitable 7/7 with Trample. It's a fine limited card. You'll probably pick this once you know you're in the counter Simic deck, so overall, fine card. Next up, Skatewing Spy, 3 and a blue for a Fiducian Roll Mutant, 5 and a green for Adept 2. If this creature has no +1/+1 counters on it, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has flying. And the flavor text, a better Ravnica begins with a better Simic. So, honestly, yet again, perfectly fine limited card. The fact that you can use this to give your creatures inevitably flying with the counter Simic deck, that's perfectly fine and limited, and the fact that it can become a flyer itself, good card. We'll probably see limited play, no sweat about that. It's a good finisher in limited. Good card. Next up, the Combined Guild Mage. 3 and a blue for a creature Merfolk Wizard. It is an uncommon, and it is a 2/2. And it's kind of one of the least exciting Guild Mages, but it has some cool abilities. Like 1 in a green, this turn, each creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And then 1 in a blue to move a +1/+1 counter from target creature control onto another target creature you control. Honestly, perfectly fine limited card. It's not great. Like, there are better Guild Mages, don't get me wrong. But all these abilities are relevant to the Simic deck archetypes that we've been seeing that are encouraged and limited. So, by that factor alone, it's a perfectly fine card. And the fact that it has little combo synergies, like, say, with Biomance's Familiar or with the Benthic Mage, where maybe you move a counter from one of your creatures, put it on that mage so you can draw a card and discard a card. There's just little synergies like that that makes this card a lot more effective in that deck archetype. Now, it's probably one of the worser Gilliam Ages we've seen, but I do think those abilities are still relevant for Limited. It might see play in the Merfolk deck? I don't think so. Who knows? Maybe. Next up, a perfect limited bomb for the Simic deck, the Galloping Lizwog, free, green and a blue for a creature frog lizard. Trample, when Galloping Lizwog enters the battlefield, you may remove any number of 1/1 counters from among creatures you control. If you do, put twice that many +1/+1 counters on Galloping Lizwog. I might have overfed him. Yet again, they did pretty crazy with the art, kind of like they did with the Shark to Crab and such, so not a great card art, not a great kind of like really cool creature design and such. And overall, this is just a perfectly fine limited card. Let's say you're playing the Simic deck, or you're playing like a Gruul Riot deck that you splash blue in, and the fact that you can now get those counters to make this into a big creature with trample, that's a very powerful limited effect. I don't think this will see standard play, though this is a perfect Timmy card for standard. I could see a Timmy playing this card as just like, I'm going to play a bunch of counters, and then I'm going to make this into a big trample and try to swing in for lethal. Yay! I could see it like that, though. Who knows? Maybe this could be a perfect top-end for a Merfolk counter deck. Who knows? I might be surprised. But overall, just a great limited card. I don't know if it will see standard play. Who knows? I could be wrong. Next up, the Syndicate Guild Mage. The Orzhov Guild Mage, white and a black for a creature human cleric, 2/2. It has 1 and a white, tap target creature with power 4 or greater, or 4 and a black. Syndicate Guild Mage deals 2 damage to target opponent, Planeswalker. Honestly, perfect Guild Mage. It's a perfect bear with upside, and those activated abilities are relevant and limited. Sometimes you have to tap down a big creature, and then there's just sometimes where being a painter can help close out games, so don't underestimate this card. This card is really good and limited. So, as for standard, probably too slow. Next up, Orzhov Racketeers. 4 and a black for a creature human rogue. Whenever Orzhov Racketeers deal combat damage to a player, that player discards a card. Afterlife 2. It's a free 2. Look like you need protection. Honestly, just a perfect limited card. The fact that you can use this as a 5 mana free 2, kind of like aggressive card to be able to hopefully get damage to the opponent and do card hate is cool. But the fact alone that this is the card where the opponent has to decide how to deal with it, because the factor is they are going to get the tokens out of it, will make this opponent feel very cautious of blocking this creature. And just by that little threat aspect alone of the fact that the tokens will come out of this, will make this card kind of like a perfectly fine limited card. It's a good card. As for standard, probably not. Next up, a card that is both perfect for limited and might actually see standard play. Ministry of Obligation, 2 and a white for a 2/1 with Afterlife 2 Human Cleric. Honestly, this is a fine limited card. The factor, yeah, you're paying 3 mana for a 2/1, which is kind of costly. However, the factor that this is a creature that you can both use aggressively to deal 2 points of damage, and then the opponent has to worry, because, like, well, if I block this, then I'm giving my opponent 2 spirits, which is going to be annoying. Or the fact that you can use this as a defensive to protect yourself against higher drops with 2 toughness, and then you get the spirits out of it, is a very powerful effect. And it's also one of those cards that I think in standard might actually help out with the Mardu or Orzhov, or even just a variation aristocrat decks, because this is a really good afterlife enabler. You're going to get the tokens relatively earlier game than, say, if you try to cast Orzhov Racketeers. Overall, perfectly fine card. I think it will see play in the Mardu aristocrat decks if it's a thing, but it's also just a really good limited card. This card is going to help seal out games more than people think. Next up, Giant Engineer. 1 green and a blue for a creature of a darkened wizard. Add green and a blue. As I contemplate what is, I dive ever deeper into the depths of possibility. Then I set an experiment in motion and watch the truth rise to the surface. And it's a 1/1. Honestly, it's a good mana dork. If you need it unlimited, you probably will play it, though it is prone to a lot of removal, especially in standard. Though I can see some standard decks trying it out, at least. Though, on the other hand, we do have that elf mana dork that's just kind of significantly better in all things. But, hey, this is a mana dork where you don't have to force a counter on it, so who knows. They might even share play in the right ramp deck. Who knows? Still, fine limited card, and it's just a cool art card. Like, the art's really cool with the little contrast of light here and such, and just the pods in the back. Anthony did pretty good with the art. Good job. Next up, Gruul Beastmaster, free in the green. I also like the art on this one. It's like, Rrr! And the beast's like, Rrr! It's a creature, human shaman with Riot. It's a 2/2, so it either can be a 2/2 with haste or enters in as a free. And when it attacks, another target creature you control gets +X +0 on 2 on a turn, where X is Gruul Beastmaster's power. Honestly, just a perfect limited card. The fact that it can attack as a 2/2 with haste, and then maybe if you have a 1-drop that you can attack with, give the 1-drop a significant attack boost, is a very powerful ability. Don't underestimate it. It's a good card. It will see some limited play, no sweat. I could even see some people trying this in Standard, though I am not sure if it's going to cut it out in Standard. Though, who knows? Maybe you'll see play in Mono Green Stompy to help get your big Golta out. Who knows? Maybe. Next up, Savage Smash. Savage Smash. 1 red and a green for a sorcery spell. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. It fights target creature you don't control. A Gruul Berserker is never unarmed. Honestly, this one's easy. It's a perfect limited card. I don't really see this play in other multiple formats because, well, there are better removals in those formats. But this is a perfect limited card. The fact that you get the stat boost and remove the creature, so then now your Gruul creature can actually get in for more damage, is nothing to sneeze at. Perfectly fine limited card. Next up, Rakdos Roustabout. 1 black and a red for a creature ogre warrior, free 2. When the creature becomes blocked, it deals 1 damage to a player or planeswalker it's attacking. That one has a bright future, perfect instincts for the rhythm of mayhem. Honestly, just yet again, a perfectly fine limited card for Rakdos. Honestly, you're going to have probably a lot of spectacle enablers, and this is a really good one. The fact is, it's a very aggressive-oriented creature. If you... Excuse me. There we go. The fact that you can use this as both an aggressive creature and get in for free, it gives the opponent a choice. Do they want to get dealt 3 points of damage and enable Spectacle? Or do they want to block this and know that they're going to still be dealt a point of damage and still enable Spectacle? They're probably going to do the latter, obviously, but still, just the factor that the opponent is forced into that weird cross-case corner makes this a perfectly fine limited aggressive card. I don't know if it will see play in Standard, though there is the temptation. I do think there are better aggressive, like Rakdos-based options in the meta, but it's a thought to put in the back of your head at the very least. Next up, Burn Bright. 2 and a red for an instant spell. Creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. From a great bonfire at the dawn of time, the first Gruul kindled a rage. The same flame burns in you. So, honestly, this one's pretty simple. This is just a really good instant Trumpet Blast. Mostly, I think it's going to be used as a finisher. Though, don't underestimate the fact that you can actually use this as, say, a semi-combat trick to help protect your creatures in trades and such. So, keep that in mind. Overall, just a fine limited card. I don't know if you'll see Standard play, though. Next up, Hackerbat. 1 black and a red for a creature, human rogue. It has Spectacle for black and a red, and it's a 2/3 that has 2 activated abilities. Either gains Death Touch until end of turn, or it gets +2/-2 until end of turn. They all want to see me fall. Honestly, just a perfectly fine limited card, and it might even have some potential to see play in Standard, weirdly enough. Just the fact that it's a very good aggressive-oriented Spectacle enabler. Because, for a few things, the opponent has to deal with a choice. Do they want to, when they chump block this, do they want to know the factor that their creature probably will die because of the Death Touch? So they might decide, okay, I'm not going to block. I want to protect my creature. And the fact that then you have the second activated ability to be like, okay, you're not going to do that? Then I'm going to attack in for 4. That's a very powerful effect in Limited. This is a very perfectly aggressive card. I even think it might even have a chance to see some slim play in Standard. Just those activated abilities alone, the fact that you can make it have Death Touch to help protect you. Maybe you're in a board state where you have to protect yourself against a big creature. You can block it with this creature and it gains Death Touch to kill the creature off. The fact that it can be both used as a kill spell and both as an aggressive unit is a very powerful ability. It's a good card. Next up, Soulform Hybrid. 1 and a blue for a creature human lizard warrior. 4 green on green for a 2/2. for a depth 4, and it's a 2/2. But if you spend 6 mana, it becomes a 6/6. Within each of us, the potential for great power waits to be released. Honestly, just a perfectly fine limited card. I don't think we'll see standard play. It's more just a really good limited card that's a bear with upside. That if late game, if you have this bear to make it into a 6/6, that maybe has beneficial synergies if you have the other Simic Matter counter synergy cards. Keep that in mind. Perfectly fine limited card. Next up, one of the more weirder mythics of the set, the Mesmerine Benthic. Free, blue and a blue for a creature octopus. When it enters the battlefield, create 2/2 blue illusion creature tokens with. Whenever this creature blocks a creature, that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Mesmerine Benthic has hexproof as long as you control an illusion, and it's a 4/5. Honestly, perfectly fine creature for limited. The fact that you get a 4/5 with semi-hexproof and you get the additional blockers can very help you against, like, if you need to be very defensive oriented against aggressive strategies. The fact that they freeze the creatures is very nice, and the fact that you still get a 4/5 out of it, that's just decent stats for a 5-drop. Now for standard, I think there's some silly shenanigans you can do with this in like a blue mid-range deck with cards that like quads duplicate and such to get multiple illusions out, or play other type of illusion cards like Nakramiba or even Jace Cunning Castaway, etc., etc. Or maybe you can even just go totally silly and play like Arcane Adaptation and make your other creatures into illusions, so this still has the semi-hexproof. Honestly, I think this will be a fun card to test in standard. I don't know if it's a great standard card. We really just have to test it out and see. One card that I will say that will see standard play no matter what is Kaya's Wrath. White, white, black, black for sorcery. Destroy all creatures. You gain life equal to the number of creatures you control that were destroyed this way. Tessa convened the meeting of the Obsat. Kaya ended it. Honestly, just a perfectly, perfectly great standard card. It's also a good limited card if as long as you play it right, making sure you kind of like stall and then play the board white so then you can just play and get into the board state advantage. But mostly, let's be frank, this is a card for standard. And this is a very powerful card for standard because this is a 4-mana unconditional board wipe. It's been a long time since we had a 4-mana unconditional board wipe. Now, yes, the technical condition, in quotation marks, is that it is a very mana intensive cost. It costs white, white, black, black. No denying that. However, the factor is the factor you can use the factor that we're in a meta with a lot of shock lands, with a lot of check lands, and even ways just to maybe make a 5-color deck work or tap your land for multiple colors. I think this card will be a lot more effective than you take at first glance. This will obviously see play in Esper control. It will see play in Orzhov control or even Mardu control. It might even see play in 5-color control or 5-color good stuff. It's just that good of a card. It's a really good card. It's kind of the Assassin's Trophy of the set. It's a very powerful card. Don't underestimate it. It's going to see a lot of standard play, so get used to it. Next up, another powerful card, Domri, the Chaos Bringer. 2 red and green for a legendary planeswalker Domri that has 5 loyalty, which is absurd. And it has an activated abilities of +1. Add red and a green. If this mana is spent on a creature spell, it gains Riot. -3. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 creature cards from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order? Okay, that's really good. Or -8. You get an emblem with at the beginning of each end step, create a 4/4 red and green beast creature token with Trample. Okay, I think it's safe to say, and everybody's been kind of saying the same thought, this is the most powerful Planeswalker from this set. It's just a really, really good Gruul Planeswalker. Let's just go through all these abilities one at a time. +1. The fact that you can use the mana for creature spells and get the creature's Riot is very powerful. I mean, we're still scared about the factor that now that we have 2 ways to enable creatures to have Riot that don't have Riot from their card design, that's very scary. Like, there are some very scary creatures that you can give Riot to. Like, the one that everybody's talking about, even I say it, giving Carnage Tyrant haste is just, that's scary. But there's also just little stuff like maybe in a Teamer deck where, oh hey, you know how Vannifar, the main weakness of Vannifar is the factor that it has, say, summoning sickness, so You can't do the breeding pool effect. Well, not breeding pool. Birthing pod effect right off the bat, and it can get removed. Oh, hey! If Domini's on the field and you use the mana to cast Vanifar, then it has haste, so you can have Birthing Pod at haste speed. Ugh, that's really scary. Ugh, that's ew. Like, that's really ew. And there's a lot of creatures that, from design, don't have haste, but if you give them haste thanks to Domri, there's going to be some silly shenanigans. I'm just going to say that right off the bat from the +1 ability alone. And even then, if you don't use it to cast a creature, you can still use the mana for other stuff. You're not restricted to creature spells. Sometimes I think there are going to be circumstances where you're going to just +1 just to do a shock, and that's perfectly fine. It's kind of secretly a really cool mana dork planeswalker in that sense. Now the -3. To look at the top 4 cards, you may get 2 creature cards from them and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This ability is good, but it's not as great as people are kinda speculating. Now, it's a good ability, don't get me wrong, but I think people are kind of getting to the best case mentality where it's like, oh, this ability is going to make me draw 2 cards because I'm in a very heavy creature-oriented deck, right? No. Even if you're in a heavy creature-oriented deck, we've seen cards like this, or even cards in themselves that have this ability, and let's be frank, you'll be lucky enough to get 1 card. And honestly, I think you need to look at it that way. -3, you're going to draw 1 card, which honestly, if you're playing a red-green aggressive deck, that could just be fine, because you're just trying to get more aggressive creatures to put on the board to get into a green stompy board state to go aggressive. So that just might be fine by itself, so that's something to consider. Now, it also, the -8, I don't think it's going to be applicable to standard. Though, let's be frank, if you can get away with the -8, you do kind of close out the game. It's a perfect commander ultimate ability because the factor is, since you have multiple players on the field, the fact that at the end of each player's turn you create a boar, or not a boar, a beast that's a 4/4 red-green beast creature token with trample, that can help you finish out the game relatively really quick in the right board set matchups. So, overall, Dominant Chaos Breeder is a perfect planeswalker of the set. It's going to see standard play. And it is a perfect limited bomb. If you pull this in limited, you're going to be one happy camper. I'll say that right off the bat. Next up, the Theta of Horrors. 1 black and a red for an enchantment that has, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. During your turn, if an opponent lost life this turn, you may play cards exiled with Theta of Horrors. It has an activated ability of 3 and a red that it deals 1 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. Honestly, this is a really, really good card for Spectacle Enabler decks. This kind of reminds me of Phyrexian Arena in some sense, because the factor is, if you're in the deck where this is designed for, aka the damage-oriented, you're going to constantly try to deal damage to the opponent's face, this essentially just says draw 1 extra card, and anytime you deal damage to the opponent, you can cast that card. And also, not even cast, you can play a card. So if you exile a land, and you just still do damage to the opponent, and you don't have a land in your hand, you can just play it from the exile pile if you deal damage. And the factor in itself, it can be used as a way to deal damage to the opponent or a planeswalker is very relevant. Yeah, this card is bonkers in standard. As for limited, it has to be in the right deck. I think it is a powerful limited ability, though just be very careful. Don't draw yourself out too quick with this card. But I think it's a perfectly great limited card. It's a great standard card. It most likely will see play in standard. Get ready for it. Next up, Essence Capture, 2 blue for an instant. Count on target creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature you control. It's not enough to defeat our foes. We must learn from them too. Honestly, it's just a good standard card. It'll be interesting to see if the mono blue tempo or kind of like counter mana decks might actually play this card. I mean, the fact that we've seen that mana dork that has it where a counter gets put on it, you can tap for free mana, makes this card a lot more tempting when you take a look at it. So, I think this card, especially in decks that run like Essence Scatter and such, I think you'll see standard play if they can get away with the 2 blue mana costs. And honestly, this is just a perfectly fine limited card if you need to. It's not going to see play constantly, but it's a fine card. Okay, we're on to the last 3, and I'll go really quick because this is a long video. Sphinx of New Prav, 2 white, 2 blue for a flying vigilant spell. Your opponent casts a target Sphinx of New Prav, costs 2 more to cast. Azorius Sphinxes are loyal to the precepts of the laws. not to any particular guild master, even one of their own kind. It's a 4/3 with Fine Vigilance that can be hard to remove. Perfect limited card, I don't think it will see much standard play though. Still, really great finisher in limited. Next up, Sahara Wayfinder. 1 in a green for a creature elf scout. It's a 2/1, and when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them and put it on the top of your library. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Stay close. It's just a little farther. Honestly, and I think many people are kind of disappointed by this card because the fact is you don't draw the card, you put it on the top of your library. However, I think this card still is not one to underestimate. Because the fact is, yeah, it's still a way you can fetch a creature card and then put it into your deck on the top. I think that's going to be a lot more relevant, especially since you're kind of foreshadowing when you activate this ability. So then if an opponent, says, has a specific hand hate card, which we've been seeing some cards that are hand hate in the meta, the fact that you put it on the top of the library so the opponent can't target it unless they play like a Field Loon or a way to shuffle your library, that's actually more relevant than you think. So honestly, and even then, as slow as the tempo as it is, I still think the card is still powerful enough to at least try an elf-oriented style decks. Overall, I think it's a good standard card, and it's perfectly fine limited card. You'll play this as just a piker with upside, to be quite frankly honest. And the last card of this review video, Nikia of the Old Ways, free red and a green for a legendary creature Centaur Druid. You can't cast non-creature spells. Whenever you tap land for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produce. The hooves of the raised boar will trample the weak, and their city to dust. Honestly, this is a weird commander card. And the reason why it's weird is because, at first glance, this is a one-sided mana flare, which you would think is a very, very powerful ability. It is a very powerful ability. The catch, though, is you can't cast non-creature spells, which you think at first glance is not that much of a problem, because it's like, well, let's think about this. I'm just going to play this more in a red-green creature stompy deck. Do I really mind the fact that I can't cast non-creature spells? I don't think that matters that much. It kind of does matter, because even then, in those creature-oriented decks, they still like to run spells like combat tricks. They still want to run finishers that help them make their creatures a lot bigger and be able to get in for the final lethal amount of damage. And honestly, there's even commander players I've been talking about that said that there's still just a variety of better rule options. So in Commander, while you can use this as your commander, it's not as exciting as a commander as people are saying, and many people are just kind of like, on a commander. Now for Standard, ooh, that's a completely different story. I think in Standard, if we can get a red-green stompy deck be a thing, a one-sided mana flare is perfectly fine. Because think about this. You cast this on turn 5, and then if you play a land on turn 6, you can have enough mana without even have to worry about the powerness to cast Golta. That is absurd. Yeah, I think this is a perfectly good standard card if we want to make the red-green kind of like, I'm going to hit you in the face with a lot of creature stompy be a thing. And also, this is a perfectly great limited card. As long as you design your deck around it, this card will give you a lot more plays than you think. It's a very powerful limited card. Great for Standard. Commander, someone will try it at the very least, but I think it's more of you put it in your Commander deck, in the deck, but not play as your Commander. And overall, that's all the cards they revealed so far. Boy, this was kind of a long video. I'll try to cover the rest as soon as I can get to them. Thank you for watching the video. If you liked it and you have any other opinions on the cards that have been shown off, you can post them in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you like this video. I hope you have a lovely day. This is LevDev signing out.